they'd be. We elect them because what kind of candidate they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she has not been a very good one.
Yeah.
But she's added she's played her role in the campaign, just like Butch Baum did, and I mean, everyone's had a role to play.
Yep. You. Just why don't we start off with the most general? And as we do these things, whenever I say something like, describe Louisiana politics, try to start out by saying Louisiana politics is, or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, but keep it as loose as we've been talking. I mean,
Sure.
that's
That's the idea. Sure.
Louisiana politics, what's it like?
Well, I think Louisiana politics is in a state of change right now, and maybe in this election we're seeing us go from being a banana republic to trying to join the rest of the Union. I don't know if we're going to quite do it this year, but we're starting to do it. Louisiana politics, I think, has always been created by a situation where you've got a lot of poor people and you've got a lot of middle class people who don't have to pay taxes because the big oil companies or someone else are paying them, and so they don't tend to mind what the politicians do with the money. And that's the way we've operated in the state for about 60 years. Now that we're running out of money, we're trying to figure out what to do.
In your book you said there was a tradition of scallywags or something?
There's always been a tradition of scoundrels in Louisiana, going back to the days of Jean Lafitte, who, he would rip off the Spanish fleet and smuggle it past the Americans and sell it to the French in New Orleans at a big, big discount. I guess he was the first Schwegmans in Louisiana, but he was that kind of guy that he allowed Louisiana to live off of other people's money. The oil companies allowed us to live off of other people's money too. We've always had a real colorful tradition in Louisiana politics, I think, because I guess many people felt that nothing else was at stake. They didn't pay taxes, so politicians were looked on as entertainment value and what they can give the people, what they can give them in the form of roads and free school lunches, and what they can give them in the form of a few laughs.
A lot of states, especially in the South, people would say the same thing, that the politicians, at least the tradition, was there for the color, for the entertainment. But it seems to be more so here in the state of Louisiana.
We've always had more colorful politicians, and I think more so in the last 20 years that Edwin Edwards has, I think, set the curb for what that we have always looked at as the traditional theatrical politician, but at the same time someone who was hardly a buffoon, someone who could get things done, whether for the people of the state or for himself and his friends.
Do you think Edwin is a logical heir to the long thing? Is he a populist?
Yeah, Edwin Edwards is definitely a populist, and maybe he's the last of the populists as far as this election goes. He seems to be, he's been very consistent in his politics. He's dancing with the girl who brought him to the dance, and he has never betrayed or he's never let go of or turned his back on that constituency. He's never tried to change, even though he probably would have been in a lot better shape today had he tried to conduct himself more as a candidate of the middle class. He stuck with those people, and that's why they're sticking with him.
Is he the logical heir to Huey Long?
I would say, yeah, Edwin Edwards is the political heir to Huey Long, far more so than Russell Long has been. Russell Long went and got in bed with the very oil companies that Huey Long always fought. Edwin Edwards hasn't exactly fought oil companies either, but he has presented himself as the populist for Louisiana. He was the governor who really, I think, reshaped state politics in his image, the way Huey Long did.
What does populism mean in Louisiana?
In Louisiana, populism means taking care of the poor folk, and also means taking care of the poor folk without taxing the middle class. And it means something for nothing. There's a very good tradition there that I think cannot easily be dismantled, nor should be, but probably could be a lot more efficiently, effectively run for the sake of everyone.
Louisiana is a banana republic. What does that mean?
Well, a banana republic is a country or a land that's run by one strong leader, and we certainly have that tradition here of one big bad guy that we elect to go take on the oil companies or the federal government or whoever else. And a banana republic is a place where the ruling class doesn't have to sacrifice very much in order to have a very comfortable way of life and an atmosphere for business. Banana republic is a place where there's a vested interest in the people's ignorance and their poverty, and that as long as they're down, they will always need the politicians.
Hold on just a second.
Okay, can we,
Are the people talk about the politics and the politicians being different in Louisiana? First of all, let's do with the politicians. Are they different, and then are the people that elect them different in some way?
Are the politicians different in Louisiana? I suppose they are. Politicians are just a factor of what they can get away with. I think politicians are defined by what people will let them do. In Louisiana, they've been given, a broad running room, lots of running room, and lots of money to do it with, and that's created kind of the type of politician we've had. Are the people in Louisiana different? I think that they're not radically different, but there are more poor people in Louisiana. There are more uneducated people in Louisiana. One business lobbyist in Baton Rouge even makes the point that because there are more Catholics in Louisiana and a stronger link to Europe, that there is more of a feeling that people have a greater fealty to the king, and that we create situations that it has created a situation which it is easy for one politician to make himself, in effect, the king. It could be that in Louisiana, maybe just a mixture of European culture and poverty and ignorance has created a situation where we tend to put all our faith, or whatever, in the hands of a few strong people and not in the hands of a representative government.
A lot of places we stop, people go, they whisper to us and they go, and it's because of the blacks and the illiterates. That's what's the matter with the state.
Well, yeah, I mean, ignorance and poverty are the two main problems with the state, and you can put whatever kind of race or creed or whatever attached to that, but it's the situation may not be different than a lot of countries in South America, a lot of countries in Asia, where you have a lot of poor people and a few people that own a lot of stuff, basically wealthy land and a lot of poor people who have to live on it.
It's sort of, it's almost this moral conflict that a lot of, you've got folks that look at Edwin Edwards and they look at him not only as somebody who is morally corrupt, but represents people that are beneath them in some way. And it's a strange, I wonder if reform takes on, not only reform stuff, but also questions of class, questions of...
I think Edwin Edwards has been the perfect class candidate for what he has tried to do in Louisiana. He is a product of the lower class who went straight to the upper class and never stopped in the middle class and got hung up with middle class morality or mentality or hypocrisy or any of those things. And that has made him both a champion of the lower classes, despite the fact that he now is a very wealthy man. They still see him as one of them. And even a lot of wealthy people can relate to Edwin Edwards because he is a wealthy man who made his money and enjoys it.
For the years that I've lived here, when he was governor, even when he wasn't governor, every discussion of state politics, every election seems to revolve around Edwin Edwards. What makes him different? What's going on?
In Louisiana, we have tended to focus our politics around one strong person, and Edwin Edwards has just stayed on top longer than anyone else has. I think a part of it is that Edwin Edwards is different than politicians of the past, say like Huey Long, in that he has never let it really go to his head. Edwards, one of the most wisest things I've ever heard him say is that things are never as bad or as good as they seem, and that he uses this when he's shooting craps, that he never lets himself get too depressed or too exalted. That's no way to shoot craps or way to do politics or do business. I think it's a very wise way to live your life. I think if anything, he may have betrayed that own philosophy after the 1983 election when he won with 1 million votes and he was at the very peak of his political career. And then I think then it started to get to his head some, and that's when it started coming crashing down for Edwin Edwards.
Okay, we'll as a human being and as a
Hmm.
politician.
Hmm.
Just wait till we get this up.
Because the whole assumption of this thing is that it's, somebody that wins as much as he does, and somebody that focuses.
You want to use that, Paul? Would you like to get up there?
Yeah.
Okay, we're ready.
It's hard to prejudge, what history is, but every now and then there's something that you go, hey, there's something going on here, and when we look back, people go, wow, wasn't that a colorful person? Wasn't that a dominant politician?
So how would you describe him now, in both as his personally as a character as well as a politician? What would that-
Well, Edwin Edwards is a very hard person to read, but you can tell that. Now, let's start over again. I'm going to lose my train of thought. I'm doing a Bob Livingston here.
Yeah, right.
Tape is
Excuse me,
cheap, so don't worry about it.
Okay. Well, the thing that's always interested me about Edwin Everett's personality is that in a room full of people, you feel that he's just so warm and engaging, and that he's talking to each one of you. But if you talk to him one-on-one, you sense I don't think coldness is the right word, but a real detachment, that he can be a lot more personable and sincere with 100 people than he can be with one. I always contrasted him with Dave Treen in the last election. Dave Treen was supposed to be the ultimate woodenhead, right? And but Dave Treen, with either in a small room or just one-on-one, was a convivial, down-to-earth, nice guy. Would drink a scotch and have a laugh with you. Edwin Edwards, I always felt like he was sipping his Kool-Aid and looking at you out of the side of his eye, checking up on you. He always has the one-liner, and like he immediately wants to be a one-up in a situation, so he'll put you down. But then he'll pick you up and say something nice to you. And with reporters, it's an even stronger hate-hate relationship. I always like to say that Edwin Edwards doesn't like any reporter, but don't take that personally. He's just doing his job, you do yours. He's
as a politician, how would you describe him?
Well, as a politician, he is, on one hand, I think, a real megalomaniac, in that he, and maybe that's what you need to be if you're really going to be governor of Louisiana and run this state the way it has been the last 20 years. Not necessarily the way it's going to be, but it's been Louisiana's the kind of system when, you've really got to try and fill up the power of the office, and Edwin Edwards has done that. But he's not been vindictive about it, and that's what I say it's been different from him and Huey Long. Huey Long would crush people who gotten in his way, and other governors after did that too. If you disagreed with me, you're a mortal enemy, and I'm going to have to crush you if I'm going to survive. Edwin Edwards has not been vindictive. He'll crush you, but he'll pick you up and brush you off, and and put you in the back of the wagon. You can ride with him. He's and I think the most successful politicians in America have done just that, and you certainly can't call Edwin Edwards anything less than one of the most successful politicians in America. So he's very wise and he's very practical about his politics. He doesn't let anything in government, I don't think he takes anything personally, whether it's an idea of building a monument to himself or doing something to preserve his name. He doesn't get hung up on those kind of things. I think he always focuses on what's at hand, and that's helped him out real well.
As a politician, though, what makes him so much more successful? Is he really larger than life compared to these other guys?
Yes, I think that's we expect still of our politicians, that they be larger than life, and in the current campaign, Edwin Edwards certainly dominates the field. The other guys are midgets compared to him. Some are figurative midgets, some are literal midgets, but they're all, compared to Edwin Edwards, they don't hold a candle to him. And it's only by the fact that Edwards, with his enormous personality, has so, in the perception of many people, so enormously wronged this state, that he's in a position where more than half the people in the state want to vote against him. But they're going to vote against him once, and then they're going to get in a runoff of Edwin Edwards versus one other guy. And people are going to have to decide, do they want to vote against him a second time, and do they want to vote for this other guy? And that's where I think Edwin Edwards' greatest strength is going to come in, his saving grace, as it were. his total lack of hypocrisy. I wouldn't say a total lack of hypocrisy. I'm sure he's a little bit of a hypocrite, but basically he's been refreshingly clear of that. I think that was the one aspect that brought down Gary Hart, that brought down Joe Biden, that they tried to present themselves to be something other than what they were, and even when faced with an embarrassing situation, they still tried to deny it or cover it up in some way. And Evan Edwards has never done that, and that's, I think that has really endeared him to the people that you wouldn't expect it to endear him to. Take the fundamentalists. I was up in, and I get fundamentalists and Pentecostals mixed up sometimes, so I hope we don't get too many people upset out there. But let's take the Pentecostals. I was up at the famous Tioga rally up in 1983 that they have every year, their tent meeting. And Edwin Edwards was out there just wowing the masses, quoting scripture, and had them on their feet and laughing and cheering. And I asked one of the Pentecostal ministers there, what is the deal with this guy? I mean, the people out here have all heard the stories of his womanizing, of his gambling, of corruption. Why do they love Evan Edwards? And this guy looked at me and said, he doesn't drink or smoke. So, I mean, it just shows you that some things are more important than others. But I think that the thing that these people appreciate, and beyond the fact that they belong to a certain religious sect, they're ordinary people, and they can appreciate in Evan Edwards that he doesn't hold himself up to be some kind of superhuman, or that that as a politician he's holier than thou. He's not, and he accepts his foibles and laughs about them. People appreciate that. They like this. That's the one thing they like to see in a politician, that person is going to be who they say they are, good or bad. Then they'll decide from there whether or not they want to support them. But if they sense that someone is trying to hold themselves out to be something they aren't, they'll can them right away. And that is what's carried Evan Edwards through the roughest of times.
Doesn't he have a little bit more public foibles, though, than other people do?
Sure he does, but I think in a one-on-one basis, I don't think anyone wants to hold themselves out as being holier than him. I guess the one thing, sure, Evan Edwards has a lot of foibles, but he's built up a certain immunity because of that too. One more little smudge of dirt doesn't look any worse, on Evan Edwards. Whereas by comparison, some of his opponents, some of these guys running for election right now against him, are making the mistake of trying to be the knight in shining armor. And all it takes is one little smudge of dirt to make that knight look, kind of dirty. And that's Evan Edwards' special gift, especially in a runoff, is that regardless of how bad he may look, by the end of the campaign, the other guy looks just as bad or worse. In addition to looking kind of bad, he probably looks like a hypocrite too. And that is what Evan Edwards' runoff opponent is going to have to be very wary of. That they're going to be getting in the ring with the master, with the evil one, and with the manipulator. I talked to a friend of mine today who is a big supporter of Jim Brown, who said, listen, if it's Evan Edwards and Jim Brown in the runoff, I don't even want to look at the debate. I'm afraid he'll change my mind. And I think that's what people are looking for in this election. You get Evan Edwards one-on-one with one other guy. Not Evan Edwards versus a pack of dogs. Evan Edwards one-on-one against one other guy. That person is going to have to deliver to the people as a candidate, as a politician, if he's going to win their trust.
I was just going to say, are the stories about Edwin true? I mean, people talk about all this stuff.
Well, I guess if you take Clyde Vadreen's book, Just Taking Orders, and some of the incredible stories in there, I use the 1/3 factor. If 1/3 of those stories are true, that's incredible. That's amazing. So are they true? I think it depends on what stories you've heard. I think a lot of them seem to have a consistent ring of truth to them.
Can you go through a couple of
Can you
those
give us
stories?
some examples of some stories which might have sunk a lesser politician in another state, but for some reason didn't touch Edwards or enhanced him?
Well, I mean, just the stories of his flirtations with women, I think would have sunk a lot of other politicians, but it's got to the point now where I think a lot of junior leaguers who meet him would be insulted if he doesn't make a pass at him. They'll think there's something wrong with them. So he's almost built up something more than an immunity. He's built up an expectation. And, women take that in a flattering way. I think the fact that that his wife Elaine has remained faithful to him, has stood by his side, protects him in a large way. I think people tend to think, well, if it's okay with them, it's okay with me. I share this, but been a lot of stories over the years of Edwin Edwards allegedly picking up girls, picking up women for dalliances. Who knows?
There were some things you wrote about in the book. Now we're bringing it up.
Oh, well, there were several things that I wrote about, and this was that I got pretty much from most of the people involved of, Edwin Edwards riding around the LSU campus in his limousine, making passes at sorority girls. I wrote that in my book, and at a speech after the book was published, Vicki Edwards rebutted some of my remarks. It was kind of a friendly little road show that Vicki and I had, and she said she read that passage of the book of the sorority girl who Edwin Edwards made a pass at, but who rebuffed him. And she said, let me tell you that my daddy's no saint, but if he made a pass at a sorority girl, she wouldn't turn him down. I didn't know what to make of that, but I was just like Edwin Edwards. I was amazed and astounded. She is her father's daughter. I don't know, some of the...
How about that story about, I think it was before the press club, when his wife got up after someone had said about 4 or 5 different women, he said she'd be asleep after.
Yeah, there was a... Well, one of the things that makes the stories about Edwin Edwards so interesting is that he does it right out there in public, and that his, that everyone seems to be in on the joke, including his family. At the Gridiron Show in Baton Rouge, this was back in the 70s. It was right after the publication of Clyde Vitrine's book. And at the rebuttal remarks at the end of the show, Edwards got up on stage, said a few funny things, and then he invited his wife, Elaine, up on the stage. Well, the whole show, we've been making jokes through the book on just taking orders of Edwards and girlfriends and all of this, and we were looking out of one corner of our eye in the audience, looking at Elaine Edwards just with this cement face, just, looking at us with her typical endearing countenance. And so Edwards invited her up on stage to give her rebuttal remarks, and we were like, oh my God, what is she going to say? And she brought up Clyde Vitrine's book, and she started reading this anecdote from the book of how how Edwin Edwards took 5 different women to bed in one night, and he brought each one by Clyde Vitrine's motel room door, and just to show him. And so Elaine read that passage. She closed the book, and she said, now, ladies and gentlemen, you know that can't be true, because any of us who know Edwin know that he'd be asleep after the first one. Standing ovation. The place went crazy, and Edwin was standing next to her, just beaming with pride. And that's my girl. She knows how to handle it, and indeed she does.
Describe just set it up for a second, what Clyde Vitrine's book was, and who Clyde Vitrine was, and where the book came from.
Yeah, Clyde Vitrine's book was the big kiss and tell of Louisiana politics, I guess. Clyde Vitrine was Edwin Edwards' aide from the early days and been through a lot with him and through the election. And after the election had split off from him in a very bitter split over business investments and whatever. Clyde, as a bitter man, spoke to the FBI. An investigation ensued. Nothing came of it. But eventually Clyde wrote a book, Just Taking Orders. And in it he talked about payoffs and the fast and easy life of the 1971 campaign and Edwin's sexual proclivities, and told all kind of stories about Edwin Edwards and girlfriends. And it was an amazing book, really a titillating book. And interestingly, I mean, Edwin Edwards was bitter about it, but I think he handled himself pretty well throughout the whole thing, effectively making a joke about the whole thing, casting some doubt on whether or not what Clyde was saying was true, but in the end kind of saying, what difference does it make? And indeed, I don't think it made a whole lot of difference. A type of book that I think would have embarrassed and disgraced any other politician in America, rolled right off of Edwin's back.
I want to get off of this topic in a second. There's one other story that, as we were talking, I remember something to do with the interplay between him and one of the women reporters around or something or other. We hear lots of things about him passing notes back and forth between people. Or trying to pick people up or something or other.
Well, There's a story about Edwin Edwards, I don't fuck politicians, but I guess we're going to do this on this documentary. But, no, I don't know. Anything else about him and reporters? I don't know.
What about the other politicians in the state? I mean, you know, let's say you get rid of the governor in one way or another. Is there any reason to expect that politics would change given the talent we have in the grassroots level?
Yeah, I think politics are going to change in Louisiana regardless of who's elected or re-elected governor. There are forces at work from world economics to the U.S. Justice Department that are just changing the way that we're going to practice our politics in the future. And Edwin Edwards, if anything, has been, I think, caught in that transition, and that's why he's had as much trouble as he's had. I think Louisiana politics changed and Edwin Edwards hasn't, which is why he's in somewhat trouble today. After Edwin Edwards is gone, for one thing, we're going to miss him. We won't get from our governors some of the entertainment that we've had from Edwin Edwards, but at the same time, I think we're probably ready to take a little break from the excitement. I think that, not to say that Louisiana politics will become dull, but that I think it's just going to be gradually, and maybe with some leaps and bounds, you know, with a few quantum leaps in there, but gradually is going to start becoming more like American politics. You know, we may do some other things that other states don't do, but I think our politicians in the future, we're going to, I'm kind of encouraged by the fact that we don't have another personality near Edwin Edwards in this governor's race. Maybe that might be an indication for the future that who is governor is not as important as who your city councilman is, who your state representative is. Like in other states, we a little more decentralization of the power instead of all of it being at the top. Well, if you don't have a governor with a tremendously forceful personality that captures the imagination of the people and whom, you know, they will defer everything to, if you don't have a situation like that, I think we're going to have a situation where the legislature has more power, and, you know, which is really the way it ought to be. One of the problems in this state, I think, is that for the past 40 years, we've operated under three co-equal branches of government, the governor, the Senate, and Texaco. And that's pretty much what's run this state. And that may be changing now.
You don't think, though, that there's a cycle of stuff in which you get, you know, the populist, flamboyant governor, then there's a reaction, people get bored of the reaction and come back into somebody new?
Well, I think the situation with the cycles of change in office have, as long as we've had a situation with the oil economy in this state, it probably always would have continued on like that. But now that the Louisiana business is beginning to more reflect business situations in other states, I think the politics will too. I think politics follows business. It's not vice versa. That politics is shaped by the business climate in a state and not vice versa. And our business climate in this state is becoming more business-like. It's not just a few oil companies that have some kind of deal going with the major state politicians. We have to treat business in a fairer, more even basis, and that is going to dictate having less special interest politics.
But do you really think that we're in danger of losing our unique position in politics? I mean, if you look around the state, you got the Harry Lees. I mean, look at the stuff that we vote for. But we have the foreigners.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, we've got a system it's going to take a long time. I mean, I think, you know, Louisiana might join the 20th century before it ends. I mean, I'm not going to hold my breath. And I think that right now we're clamoring for a change of leadership, but we're holding our judgment on whether or not we really want change. You know, like, do we really want higher property taxes? People are holding judgment on that. They want to change I think a lot of people want to change the leadership first, and then we'll talk about the rest later. I think it's inevitable, though. You look at the new generation of politicians, the guys under 40 years old who are running for office. They can be out in Grand Coteau or Shongaloo, but they look like they just stepped off a Live at 5. I mean, they're more media personalities that are running for office today, and not the old kind of politician who was indigenous of his culture and who, you know, expressed the common man. Our politics, like everyone else, is becoming more homogenized. What it takes to win on TV is what we're getting. And I think in the end, it's going to lead to a blander kind of politics in Louisiana. But it's not going to happen overnight. There'll still be a few laughs and a lot of tears before all that happens.
What about the system? I want to get into the system, the fact that, I mean, if you can impede that kind of stuff, because I agree with you, yeah. I mean, younger candidates are different.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we were at the plantation for that rally the other night, and on the way there were these.
Yeah, and I guess that's the part that's still the same about the old, you know, hauling the votes into the election, and the half-pint bottles of whiskey being the currency of politics on election day.
How does that work? I mean, I mean, there are all these grand stories of mobilizing the vote. And what happens in Louisiana on mobilization day?
We running? We on? I think the closer we get to the election, I think the more traditional our politics become. And right down to election day itself, when we start, the get out the vote effort is a physical effort of actually hauling voters to the polls. What usually happens is either out in the country parishes, you know, the sheriff or clerk of court the candidates spread some money around through them, and they spread it around to certain, but usually black leaders, who hire drivers to go out into, you know, desolate little country roads where no one knows where they are, and pick up voters and bring them to the polls. Usually, you know, safely you can assume that 8 out of 10 times they're going to vote for the person that you ask them to vote for. I was up in Point Capee Parish not long ago, and an official of government up there was describing to me the basic system and how it works, how the half-pint bottle of whiskey is sort of like the currency of politics up there. They stacked up in these little vans, and they load up the people in them, and after they vote, they get their half-pint bottle of whiskey, which I guess is more valuable to them than a box of fried chicken. And you know, that they'll go, and there's always a you know, a difference of opinion, something like a Consumer Reports, as to whether this leader will get you the votes or whether this guy, he ain't worth nothing. You know, he'll waste you I can get more votes with $200 than he could with $1,000. And you know, you hear all these assessments on how good these guys are. But I mean, that's part of I think the real give and take of Louisiana politics, when it really gets down to that level, and it's hard to stamp out. I was talking to the same guy, almost in the same, one of the other favors that's done a little further up the line for the help of the middle guys is who can fix a ticket. I mean, fixing a ticket is very important in Louisiana politics. I was talking to one sheriff's deputy who said that, you know, he was so enraged at a district attorney of a neighboring parish. He gave him some tickets to fix, and the district attorney said, "I'll fix the tickets." And then, you know, 6 months later, the tickets weren't fixed, and his people were starting to get letters from the court. And this guy was enraged. He said, I mean, you know, what's a DA for if he can't fix a ticket? You know, the guy said he'd fix my ticket, and he didn't do it. He said, it ain't right. And that, you know, that just shows the expectations when you get down to that level. I mean, things just kind of get flipped around about what's right and what's wrong.
We go around the state, and I swear to God, every place we go, we'll get approached by people, you know, politicos, hangers-on, police jury members, whatever, and inside of the first second, they'll tell you who they're for, and they'll talk about somebody else and say, I like them, but, and so we'll hear stories. I mean, it's, you know, it's almost like an automatic response, just unbelievable stories about the other guys. I mean, do you ever encounter that when you're out there in the same time?
Well, sure. I mean, I like that when they say, he's a fine boy, but you know, the way he treats his mama is just not right, you know, or some things more heinous than that. Sure. I mean, I think and I guess that's politics everywhere. But here, it's so reduced to personalities here, like, you know, what's an issue, you know. It gets down to what, and maybe, you know, that's not such a bad idea. Maybe we do concentrate too much on issues in a campaign and not enough on personalities, because after all, the issues that we talk about in a campaign are seldom the issues that are faced by the office holder. But one thing that you can look at in a candidate and will see in an office holder is personality and character. And maybe that's, you know, what we should be, that's not such a bad idea, to look at the way he treats his mama. You know, that may be really important in Indiana as to what kind of a candidate, what kind of office holder they're going to be. Right now, and I guess this is the same everywhere, but we tend to elect people based on not what kind of office holder they would be, but what kind of candidate they are. And this is why Eben Edwards has never lost an election, because he's the greatest candidate there ever was. I mean, he's a marvelous candidate. And when he was asked during this campaign, Governor, why are you doing this? Why are you running for office? I mean, odds are stacked against you. Edwards said, it's what I do best. He's certainly right. I think he runs for office better than he runs his office.
What do you think in the future, after Edwin Edwards retires, one way or another, is going to be his epitaph? How would you describe him in history? Where's his place in Louisiana?
The greatest compliment that we paid to Eben Edwards is that we're going to miss him when he's gone. He'll be looked upon as a transitional candidate from the populist days to modern days. He's very much a modern man, but at the same time, very much a traditional politician. He will be, I suppose, credited for getting a lot of things done with a very fractured and fragmented state politics, of bringing new elements into the political arena, particularly blacks. I think he is going to be blamed for riding along with the system instead of trying to prepare Louisiana for a future that he knew was coming. He knew the oil was going to run out one day, and not sure there were lots of pressures to spend every dime that came in, but a very effective leader who really believed in the future would have done what leaders in Texas and California did and put some of that money aside and into the university system. And we didn't do that here. That is the greatest crime committed in this state, far greater than any hospital permit or gambling casino or highway contract, is the opportunity we missed when we had the money to really put this state ahead. And you can't just indict Eben Edwards for that. All the politicians in the state and all the people are partners in that crime. We didn't demand it.
Why didn't we?
We did not demand that because I think what Kevin Riley said was true. We are, as a people, kind of lazy and stupid. A lot of people, we don't place much faith in education. Not everyone, and everyone to some degree trust education, but not to the degree that we should. And when you have that kind of situation, ignorance and poverty, it breeds populist power that we have in this state. Now, can we catch up with it now that the horse has left the barn? Well, we can eventually, but we've missed a great opportunity to get a lot further ahead. All those millions and millions and millions of dollars that were spent on hiring a lot of state workers, maybe some that we didn't need, to pay a lot of consultants, to pay a lot of road engineers, maybe for work that wasn't absolutely necessary. All that money's gone now. And, you know, everyone's to blame.
What about, do you want to go into the system, or you have?
Yeah, just about the system itself. Could you just tick off some of the offices that are elected here?
Yeah, okay,
which
sure.
are, you know, in most places you might find they're unusual, and kind of just comment on why you think that is, and is it a
Yeah.
vestige of something
Yeah.
in previous times? Or
Well, yeah, it really, there's really no reason for most of the state offices that we have, since the governor really runs everything. And it wouldn't make any difference if we just abolished all these elected offices and put them all under the governor's office, because he writes their budget as it is. So in effect, he really controls what most of them do, even the attorney general, even the state treasurer. So I could make a case for eliminating every last one of the state offices and let the governor really, just call the governor the king, you know, and I think that'd be a little more honest. But if we do want to look at the future, I think we could start by eliminating, you know, the Department of Elections, the Commission of Elections, the Commissioner of Agriculture, the Secretary of State, the Insurance Commissioner. We can do without those people easily. I think you need a lieutenant governor just for succession purposes.
Well, it's pretty wild that we elect some of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
Commissioner of Elections elected, Commissioner of Insurance
Yeah,
elected.
that's right. It's ridiculous that we do elect a lot of those things, but That's part of our political fabric, and it's almost a part of the state's economy. Elections are big business in Louisiana, and I remember Paul Hardy in 1979 saying, "There's no way this race will be decided in the first primary because the state's economy couldn't stand it." You know, you need to, and you know, in a way of looking at things, these elections are a method of redistribution of income. A lot of rich people give lots of money to candidates, and they end up giving it to a lot of local leaders who end up paying a lot of drivers and printers and door-to-door people and phone people to go out and do their work. So in a way, I think it's a way of spreading a lot of that money around. The people who say it's so corrupt, the amount of money that's spent to buy the black vote, well, I mean, I think that's a little ridiculous. All that money ends up down at the A&P in one way or another. I mean, it's some very rich people put some money into a campaign and some poor people end up with it. And a lot of people vote in the meantime. So what? It's still a secret ballot. Contrast that with the way the people usually get the white vote, which is to spend a lot of money on TV commercials, which goes into some station owner's pocket and never sees the light of day. Again, I would say that the way in which the black vote is procured is a lot more honest. And, you know, and I don't think one is any more corrupt than the other.
How do you explain Edwin's relationship with blacks? It seems like a very strong and special relationship in the state.
Edwards has a gift of whichever group he's with, that he is one of them. And the real test of a lot of politicians can do that, but the real test is, can you do it with a black crowd? And Edwin Edwards can. He has no sweat because he can understand blacks because he sees them as people who started off where he started off, and he's come a long way. Certainly there was a time in this state when Cajuns were looked upon in a lot of ways where blacks are in some quarters of this state. The Cajuns struck oil, and that's what helped them out. So Edwin Edwards knows what it is to be looked down on and to be disadvantaged, and he's came up and he's went straight to the top. And so he's never forgotten those days. Blacks recognize that, and poor people recognize that in Edwin Edwards, and they still see him as one of them. Why is Edwin Edwards going to get 2/3 of the black vote in this election? Probably because the black leaders and black voters, for a lot of them, for poor people in this state, things may be bad now, but they're not any worse than they were for them 10 years ago. Things are bad in this state for the middle class, for the people who used to have $14 an hour jobs and now who work at McDonald's. That's who are bad off. But for the poor people, things were never any worse off, so they have no reason to clamor for change. And also, poor people, including blacks, are hearing these candidates' solutions for the future, which tend to include, let's shut down this state department, let's eliminate this state service, let's privatize this hospital, let's cut out these employees. Well, that sounds rather threatening to poor people and to blacks, many of whom a lot of their support and survival depends on state government. So Edwin Edwards is the only candidate that is still that is talking about maintaining that which Louisiana has always been, is that an employer of first resort and a benefactor to many poor people in the state. That's why black people are sticking with Edwin Edwards, and I really can't blame them at this point.
Is it kind of wild, considering the trials and everything, that the governor's running around and his entire platform is gambling and lottery?
It is rather remarkable that a man can stand on trial and have Las Vegas collectors talk about suitcases full of money that was delivered to him from Edwards, and that this guy is running for office. Then he could walk out on the steps of the courthouse and saying, this is a mandate to go and pass my gambling legislation. First time I ever heard a verdict described as a mandate. But in a way, it's, you know, if you're going to judge morality, if you were to give people a choice between having higher property taxes or casinos, I think you'd probably see casinos in Shreveport before you'd see significantly higher property taxes. And that's what I think the moral argument breaks down to when you get it onto that level. I think it's no more ridiculous for Edwin Edwards to talk about the lottery and casinos than for someone else to talk about raising taxes. I think thing I like about a lottery, and I think Edwards understands it, besides bringing money into the state, is that it gives everyone a chance at the American dream, which is to get rich doing nothing. And that's the beauty of a lottery, and I think that's why we probably will see one in 1988, regardless of who the governor is. I can even make a case for casino gambling, and I think that Edwin Edwards does it eloquently. The only problem I have with Edwin Edwards' stance on casino gambling is that he says that he won't gamble in the state. What's the whole point of having casinos if he's still going to take all his money to Las Vegas? I need to keep that money right here, so I really hope he reconsiders.
Isn't that sort of amazing that you've got a governor with all the troubles he had whose gambling is so publicized?
Well, I think that by this time, nothing can hurt Edwin Edwards any more than has already been said or done about him, so why not go have a good time? That's one thing he's certainly not sacrificed his good time for public office, like a lot of other guys have had to. He's not done that. So I think it's amazing to consider it, but if you really look at it, it's not that amazing at all. It's the way, if more politicians did that, were less hypocritical, I think they'd be more successful. They're just so afraid to make that first step and to act like the way they really are. But you know, once you do it a few times, and if you're good at it, and if you've got a good line, hey, people accept that just fine. A lot of people go to Las Vegas and gamble. So what?
A lot of people say that one of the reasons that Edwards is as powerful and dominant as he is because of the milieu of politicians he's been surrounded by. I brought this guy to Louisiana's legislature. Going through these things, can you describe some of the people that are in it? Some of the more colorful people, some of the better people, some of the more limited people?
Limited people. Well, there's some wonderful guys in here. Donnie Kelly up in Natchitoches, a guy I respect a lot, a street smart country boy, if there is such a thing. Here is Cliff Newman over in Lake Charles said he really attacked me the other day. He said that I was allied with the big lobby group that was trying to eliminate him from politics and that I had shamed myself in front of the Senate. You know, he's incredible. When Cliff Newman gets up there to talk, I mean, the place just goes to sleep. And Ron Landry's the same way. Nice guys. Here's 60 Rabin. I think he stands for nepotism in the state. 60 Rabin, he's running for the Senate. His son, 30, is running for sheriff. We got that all over the state. You know, we used to have a lieutenant governor named Big Bad Bill Dodd, and now we got Little Bad Bill Dodd is running, and we have Moon Landrieu's daughter, Mary, is running for state treasurer, and her little brother Mitch is running for state representative. I think that's real nice. Fox McKithen is running for Secretary of State, just so that he can one day fill Daddy's shoes. And we have, here, Kevin Riley running for state treasurer, and his son Sean is running for state representative. I think that's fine. I mean, that's what a banana republic is all about. And I think just nothing strange at all that for me. Some of these guys. Reverend Avery Alexander said one of the most truthful things during the right to work debate on the legislature. He said, in the words of Patrick Henry, give me liberty or I don't know about death. Didn't want to go that far. Pepe Bruno is one of my favorite politicians in the state. I think he articulates the conservative point of view in the most colorful fashion that has ever been done. And he can make conservatism sound entertaining. And no one else can do that as well as Pepe can. The best thing you see in the legislature, and he has some intellectual breadth there, that he's not confined to certain things. The two most interesting guys in the legislature, I think, are Pepe Bruno and Sherman Copeland. And you would think, now here's the two guys who have the least in common. Sherman Copeland, the boss of the 9th Ward. Pepe Bruno, the darling of the conservatives on the lakefront. And yet, once in a while, you see them getting together on an issue because of maybe principle, but there's an intellectual compatibility there.
Describe Sherman Copeland for us.
In that same way, Sherman Copeland, I think, is quickly become one of the real leaders in the legislature, and not just among blacks. I just mean Sherman Copeland is a leader in the legislature. Even a lot of the conservatives respect Sherman a lot because they recognize he is at heart a businessman. Evan Edwards just paid him $200,000 to get out the vote in New Orleans, and that's pretty good business.
He's had quite a checkered past himself.
Yeah, I don't know all the specifics about it, but you know, I don't know all the specifics about it. I don't want to get into some things I'm not sure about, but he's. I remember he testified that he took a payoff once, but he's a good businessman.
Well, is he in a tradition of Louisiana politics? I mean, are we seeing blacks basically behaving the way a lot of these white politicians behave?
Well, it's good to see black politicians. I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say this, but at least starting to be able to operate on a level that a lot of white politicians have. I mean, it's as corrupt, one's as corrupt as the other, but at least you feel these guys aren't being taken advantage of as much. At least you have a black person manipulating, you know, his brothers, and not some white person doing it. You know, we get more into a class struggle than a race thing that way, and that's good.
I'm going to change the tape.
Okay, you know.
We're gonna spend some time with him.
Really?
In a couple of days. I'm gonna want to start off with you giving us
He's such a pig, but I won't say that.
anything other colorful stuff would be fine.
Yes, right.
Okay.
Edwin Edwards is thin of Leonard Chabert. If this man gets reelected, the state treasury can't take it. You know, Leonard just wants and wants and wants, and gets and gets and gets, and he's been. I think he's been a prime beneficiary of the Edwin Edwards slush funds, or his district has.
Can you start that over again? Just start a little bit slower. The first part was
Okay.
close.
Can't even remember what I said.
Edwin Edwards says that.
During the last election, Edwin Edwards said that if Leonard Chabert gets reelected, the state treasury won't be able to take it. The man just wants and wants and wants, and usually gets and gets and gets what he wants out of governors. He's been the prime, or his district has been the prime beneficiary of the tradition of slush funds in the governor's office and in direct appropriations. And that's kept Leonard in power down in Terrebonne Parish. But I think he's facing some electoral problems today. I know he's in a very tough election. That's one thing that's going on in the state right now that I think is as interesting in the governor's race, is that there are some Senate races going on that, depending on how they turn out, we will have a different state government regardless of who's elected or re-elected governor. There's the difference in the Senate right now is about 5 votes between administration control and basic legislative independence. About a 5-vote difference. And there's about 5 or 6 races in which allies of the administration are being really challenged. Depending on how they come out, we could see a different state. I mean, I think the House of Representatives is a democratic body and a pretty good political body compared to others in the country. They debate issues there, and oftentimes issues are even passed on their merits. But when they get to the Senate, they're quickly buried. It's the graveyard of reform in the Senate, and it's pretty much because it's easier for the governor to control a 20-vote majority in the Senate than a 53-vote majority in the House. And that, I think, is one of the problems why we don't have equal branches of government in this state, is that the Senate is controlled by the governor.
Do you think that Chabert is sort of your old-time-ish politician, stump politician, bayou politician? Would you describe him? And then how would you describe him?
Yeah, I would say Leonard Chabert is the old-time ward heeler politician, country politician. He never runs well in Houma, but he always gets carried through in the 10th ward of Terrebonne Parish in the coastal areas of Chauvin and like that. He's a man of the people, and my, what people. He is a classic politician of one who brings home the bacon, slabs and slabs of bacon for his people, and he does this by aligning himself with the governor. And he's made a pretty effective career of it up to now.
Let's say there isn't this big transition that might happen. The old statement about Chicago was that the city ain't ready for reform. Is Louisiana ready for reform?
Is Louisiana ready for reform? Not totally. The middle class in the state is still not quite ready to start paying real property taxes. They want to see, you know, cut the budget and scrub the budget and throw the deadheads out. But once you've done all that and you still need $200 million to pay teachers, the Southern average, or to repair the roads so that, you can drive on them. And then they're faced with the question of, do I pay a higher property tax or income tax? That's going to be the moment of truth in this state, not this election. But once we really come down to face the property tax issue on a constitutional amendment and the people in the state go out and vote for it, that will be the moment of truth when we see how fast Louisiana is ready to change.
Hold on till the people upstairs. Yeah, I got a question. Can you briefly sort of pick off Edwin's checkered past? I mean, you've got chaos, you've got womanizing, you've got gambling, you've got indictments. Just sort of for
Like
somebody.
in one state,
for somebody who's never. This is like we're meeting Edwin Edwards. Okay.
Someone who's never known Edwin Edwards. Is this
Okay.
I mean, obviously, you wrote a whole book on him.
And I mean,
But
it doesn't even have to go into detail.
I know that. I'm just trying to think of a way to sum it up. Well, in this term alone, Edwin Edwards has been investigated, indicted, tried, mistried, acquitted, investigated again, and this goes in line with his whole past. That's been investigation du jour. He went through 12 grand jury investigations before he ever got indicted, so that was 12 lives he expended. He has gambled. He has made passes at women. He has held himself out to be in a very cocky way, to be the ruler of this state, and in the end, the people have accepted it. And that's been his success, is that he's done it all with a smile and a joke, and never lost his sense of humor. And I guess that's one of the greatest gifts Edwin Edwards has had, good sense of humor. You can do a lot in this world with a sense of humor, let me tell you. He's done a lot.
If you ask any more questions, because the tie is.
Earl Long would make a great movie. I'd like to write the film script one day because it has all the elements in it. And you could look at the guy as a real buffoon and everything, but he ended up carrying out a lot of what his brother Huey started. And he was really a friend of the masses. And in his own way, I think he was a very courageous politician. And what brought him down in the end, I think he was driven crazy by the integration issue. That he, I think, basically believed in the rights of blacks, and he valued their political support, and he was not ready to be stampeded into taking away voting rights, as was the issue in 1959. And he spoke against it on the floor of the legislature, and he was given a lot of pressure by the racist politicians in this state, like Willie Raynack. And I think that's what cracked old Uncle Earl in the end, was that he saw that it was no longer easy to kind of play the both sides as it was in the old days. And the race issue was just being dragged to the surface, and politicians were being put on the spot. And he was not going to cut and run like a lot of others did. And the pressure of that and the booze and the pills, I think, finally drove him over the deep end. I think that's what cracked Uncle Earl up, was that incredible public pressure over integration.
What about Big John McKippen? Where does he fit in?
Oh, I don't know. I think history will recognize John McKippen as a great governor, if it doesn't already. Certainly, he's the best governor New Orleans ever had. He did more for New Orleans than I think any governor. The Superdome is the best example, but many other things. And he was a great salesman for the state, and he took that role very seriously to go out and bring industry into Louisiana. And he had his faults, and he was bigger than life and all like that. But he had some unsavory characters around him who may have taken greater advantage of their position than was proper. But in the end, John McKippen himself, I think, had the interests of the states at heart, and I think in a very paternal way in our tradition then, as Banana Republic. I think he was a very good Generalissimo and did a lot for the state. And he's still a colorful guy right now. We get to see him on LSU basketball reruns. He comes on and he's a character on those. He likes to show up around campus and do things, and I think some would consider him an elder statesman, some would consider him the Mad King Lear of the Piney Woods. But either way, he's played a real role as being a great character in the state, and I'd say he was a real fine governor.
You say McGiffen's bigger than life, Earl was bigger than life, Edwin's bigger than life. Are the most successful politicians in Louisiana, just as opposed to other states, just bigger than life?
Yes, I think to be a successful politician in the state up to now has required someone who was bigger than life. And Dave Treen's problem, I think, was that maybe he was on the other end of the scale, that he shrunk from the power of the governor's office. Maybe he just believed in the old, equal branches of government and the U.S. Constitution, which, is pretty inoperative here. We haven't seen the happy median, really, of someone, a business-like governor who, can speak to the people on TV without having to be a showman, without having to be a character, but who can wield the power and can get things done. We haven't seen that yet. I think we could see that in elections to come. In this election right now, I think the candidate that can articulate his views in the same league with Edmund Edwards is Buddy Roemer. He's very effective, and if he ever is elected governor, I think his method of operating will be to go over the politician's head and speak right to the people. I think he'll probably come on TV a lot and talk to the folks about what he wants done. I think in a way, if we see it in a runoff, Buddy Roemer would be Louisiana's Reagan. Edwin Edwards is our Nixon. And I think that, you could say Edwin Edwards is Louisiana's Richard Nixon. I think he compared himself to Nixon right after the mistrial. He was asked, Governor, who would you compare yourself to in history? It's a pretty wide open question. He could have taken that anywhere. He could have said Jesus Christ or the Beatles. I mean, he could have said anything. And, he said Richard Nixon. As a guy who was discredited and beaten down, but who persevered and who came back and who was rehabilitated. Because Richard Nixon was driven for office for doing practically what Edwin Edwards does for breakfast. And Edwards was, Edwards did things that would have driven any other politician from office. But maybe those guys are better off because Edwards has to face the verdict of the people, which others have not had to do, who were able to just resign. Edwards will face the ultimate verdict of the people. And I think that's the way, if he's going to go down, that's the way he wants to go down, as a candidate in an election with the verdict of the people. He said it during a trial, and it should come of no surprise to anyone that there's a big difference in this state between what's wrong and what's illegal. And ultimately, that's a question for the people to decide. And now, finally, the people are getting their chance. I think that 1987 is going to be a good year for Louisiana in one regard. Economically, it might not be any better than the last 3 years have been, but psychologically, at least now we get a chance to take it out on somebody. And if anything, people are going to the polls just so that that act of voting is going to be cathartic for this state on election day, regardless of what the outcome is going to be. Just finally to have a chance to have something to say about all this.